Hello, friends. Welcome to Feeling This Life. We're a family support podcast that dives deep into the triumphs, challenges, and strategies that are part of the lives of those who care for children with blindness and visual impairments. I'm Paige Maynard, and I'm a teacher of the visually impaired and an early interventionist at VIPS, Visually Impaired Preschool Services.
And I'm Dr. Cathy Smith, and I also have been a teacher of students with visual impairment for many years, and now I am the Director of Research at Anchor Center for Blind Children.
I am jcastenir, and I am the Family Services Coordinator at VIPS. I am the mother of 3 girls, and my youngest has a visual impairment.
Hi, Feeling This Life family. It's Jenny, and I'm excited to be here with Jamie Shake today. Jamie is a physical therapist, mom, wife, and she is visually impaired. As a mom of a child with a visual impairment, I'm so inspired by Jamie and wanted to share her story with all of you. Hi, Jamie.
Hi there. Good to be with you.
Tell me a little bit about your vision and diagnosis, just kind of your story.
I was born with optic nerve hypoplasia with nystagmus, and my vision has been the same since birth. It's been a long time since I've had my acuity tested, but I believe that my right eye is 20/200 and my left one is 20/400. And I mostly just use my right eye for reading and getting around. Occasionally I'll use my left one if I just maybe need a little bit of a break with my right eye. So when other people look at me, they don't always notice that I have a visual impairment other than the fact that my eyes are moving all the time. And, my one eye looks like it might be a little lazy, but that's only because I'm only looking at you with one eye.
When you were growing up, what did adults do to encourage you and to teach you and help you live a life like a child without a visual impairment?
Honestly, I can't say that my mom and dad thought of me any different than my sister or my cousins or the neighbor kids. If I wanted to go do something, they let me go do it. My mom, I remember her telling me this story. We used to do a lot of walking when we were kids, just to get out and about and go places. And down the street we lived, there was a lot of cracks in the sidewalk, and my mom would always hold my hand, and she said that a lot of times she would have to pull up on my hand as I would start to trip over cracks in the sidewalk. And I remember her talking later in life. She said, but she never changed the route that we were going because I fell. We just would go that every day. And she noticed that eventually I didn't fall anymore because I knew when that crack in the sidewalk was coming, and I knew I either needed to slow down or I needed to pick my feet up a little more. They let me figure it out. If it was hard, that was okay, because every child, no matter if they have any type of impairment or not, as a child, they have to learn and they have to figure it out. And so it's not any different with the child with visual impairment. They have to figure it out and they have to kind of learn as they go. And I think because my teachers and my parents and extended family and my friends, because they let me fall, I could figure out how not to.
Are there things that kids could do that could have made it easier for you?
I think looking back, growing up, I was always pretty shy, and I just kind of went with the flow of things. And I didn't really speak up for myself a whole lot. I think I had to learn that as I got older. But I think looking back at it, if I maybe had somebody to tell me, Jamie, it's okay for you to tell them you can't see it. To be able to maybe speak up a little more for myself. I missed that ball in basketball because I didn't quite see it coming at me. I remember back in school in PE, and you do the bounce, like the passing practice. I had quite a few busted lips. But I now don't think I ever told anybody that I didn't quite see it fast enough coming at me. And in that, I think sometimes my friends would forget. They would just treat me like everybody else, which I think is probably, in hindsight, what I wanted them to do. But I think maybe being able to politely express my needs better would have helped with some of that.
Said at the beginning that you're a physical therapist. So how did all that come about? How did you decide to become a physical therapist? How did your vision affect that decision? And tell us a little bit about that.
Oh, wow. I always loved science and math, and I think I knew I always wanted to do something with science. I think I wanted to be all kinds of things. I remember at one point I wanted to be a meteorologist, and at another time I wanted to be a veterinarian, and then I think I decided that I wanted to do something in healthcare. Mm-hmm. I remember thinking, well, I don't know how comfortable I would feel doing surgery on somebody. Mm-hmm. So I thought, well, I probably shouldn't become a surgeon. Not that I wouldn't have given it a try, but I think in my mind I thought, well, no, I think I could probably find something else because I love to help people. In high school, I had awful trouble with my knee, and I ended up having surgery, and I had physical therapy after a knee surgery. And I remember sitting in physical therapy one day thinking, gosh, these people help all kinds of people. And they're not sitting at a desk all day. They're up and they're running around, and I think I could do this. And so in high school, I had a health science magnet program, and it was kind of a pharmacy / physical therapy. They introduced you to a lot of medical terminology and the human body and how it worked. And I really thought that sounded great. And I was like, I'm going to do that.
How did your vision affect your education for that? Or when you interviewed for that job, did it seem like a hindrance? Were people nervous about that? Or did you have extra nerves about learning?
I know when I was in college, I kind of drove the resource department crazy because they were always calling me, wanting to do something for me. Mm-hmm. And I was like, oh, I'm fine. I don't need you guys to do anything. Mm-hmm. And they always wanted to have somebody assigned to take my notes in class. Mm-hmm. And I was like, why do I need anybody to take my notes? I don't want somebody to write my notes. I want to do that. That's how I learn, by writing it down. Mm-hmm. So I thought, that's crazy. I don't want to do that. Now, when I was in chemistry class, that particular professor, he preferred his chalkboard. And I had gotten this piece of equipment called a Geordie, kind of like a camera in these glasses. You could wear them and zoom in on things far away, but be hands-free because it was glasses. So I would always sit in the front of the room in every class. Didn't matter what I was doing. And I had a little monocular that I would use for some classes, but a chalkboard was just a whole other ballpark to read than the dry erase boards. And it was in this huge theater classroom, and honestly, I don't know how the kids that could see normally could see any of this stuff because he would write so much stuff on the board. But I used my Geordie, and at first I was a little like, man, what are all these other college kids going to say? They're all going to wonder what this thing is, and am I recording class or what? And I thought, you know what? I bet if I walk in and I pretend like I do this every day, nobody's going to ask me a thing about it. And sure enough, nobody asked me not one thing about it. And so I would, put these on, but I would kind of sit them up a little more on my forehead so that I could look up and see where he was, and then I would look back down at my paper and I would take my notes. I know this is going to sound weird. I've always been a very visual person, and that sounds weird for being visually impaired, but I never was very good at audiobooks and listening because it would put me to sleep. So I would take notes like a mad woman in class because it kept me awake. I made sure that I didn't miss a thing. I used some adaptations in college, but figured it out as I went. Sometimes something might not work, and I would just try something else. A lot of times, if my professors had PowerPoints, I would ask if I could get a printout of the PowerPoint, and I would just make notes all on the PowerPoint kind of along with them. So that was really handy too. Kind of, again, learning as I got older to speak up for myself, to say, hey, could I get a copy of that PowerPoint? And that helped out a lot too.
Do you feel like you have had to kind of explain yourself to patients, or was it hard to get them to trust you, or do people just not even notice?
I work in an acute care setting, and so those people, they're sick and they don't feel good, and they need to trust you. But I walk in and I say, good morning, my name is Jamie, I'm a physical therapist. The doctor sent me to check in on you this morning, see how you're doing. I don't introduce myself as having a visual impairment. Honestly, most patients don't pick up on it. Occasionally, they do. And you kind of feel people out as you're with them. Sometimes I've had patients say, oh, honey, did you forget your glasses today? And honestly, sometimes I say, yes, ma'am, I sure did. But occasionally you get a patient who you can tell they know that something's a little different. And so then when they say, honey, can you see that computer okay? I will say, well, I can. I just have to get a little closer to it. Some patients are just as curious about me as I am about them. And so occasionally I will run across a patient who will ask me 100 questions. And I answer every question that they have. And it doesn't bother me at all because I came to ask them a bunch of questions. Mm-hmm. So I feel like it's only fair. If I'm going to come in and ask you all kinds of nosy questions about, what we call your prior level of function, before they came to the hospital, how they were doing, and how they would do things at home, I kind of feel like it's the same thing. Very rarely have I had somebody be rude. I mean, once every 5 years. It's really rare that I have somebody that's just rude. But occasionally it happens. And that's okay. Because I usually feel like if somebody's rude, they just must be having a rough day. I don't get nervous about doing a whole lot of stuff. I have been whitewater rafting, and I've been hiking, and gone all kinds of places by myself. And I went to Guatemala on a humanitarian trip when I was in college, and that was great. There's so many adaptations. I don't feel that being visually impaired should stop anybody from their goals or their dreams. I think that they need to be a little open to maybe modifying how they might have to do things sometimes, but there's more than one way to get anything done.
Obviously, you have accomplished so much through high school and college, becoming a physical therapist, but you also have a very normal, happy, healthy, private life. Like I said before, you're a mom and a wife. So tell us a little bit about your home life.
We live in a rural community, as some people would say, out in the country. And so I love it. I mean, I've got 2 boys, and they love sports. We have played soccer and baseball and basketball and football in different teams and leagues, and they've done a little bit of everything, and I've learned a lot from them, like every parent, right? I love to cook, and I love to piddle with things outside. I'm the one that mows the grass, which is weird because growing up, that was like the one big thing my dad didn't really let me do, because I would miss places sometimes, like there'd be a little patch of grass that I would miss, and so he'd have to go back over it. And now I mow my own grass, and I don't care if I miss a spot or not. I feel like out on my mower, I'm driving, and it's time for me to be by myself, because anytime I'm ever in a car, I'm with somebody. There's never a time I'm in the car by myself. And I think some people use that time in their car by themselves to think about their day or to de-stress. And I don't ever really get that time. So I mow my grass and I weed eat. I love to weed eat.
Are there things that you use at home that kind of help you? I have a friend of mine that on her keys, she has a dot on one, so she knows that's her home key. Are there any little tricks or things that you use like that to make things easier for you?
I have a magnifying lens that was put in a set of glasses. So I keep those on our island, and nobody better move my glasses. Honestly, I keep my cell phone with me a lot of times in my pocket, because if our dog is barking and I think somebody's coming up the hill, we have this really long driveway, I'll walk to the front door and I'll use my phone camera and zoom in on things far away. Occasionally our neighbors' cows get out and they like to come hang out at our pond. And if I can tell something doesn't look quite right off in the distance, I'll use my phone a lot to zoom in on things. I know that sounds weird.
It doesn't. Hannah, she uses my phone all the time. When she wants to watch her sister swim, she'll hold the phone up, put it on video, and then zoom it in as far as it can go and just watches.
Oh my gosh, that's how I watch my boys.
Is it?
Yes. They play sports. I don't know a lot about the different maneuvers and the plays like my boys do. And, obviously, I know when somebody hits a ball because you can hear the crack of the bat, right? But I usually go by, does it go out in the field, or did somebody catch it, based on the crowd's expression? A lot of times if everybody's cheering, I cheer too, because I'm just like, I don't know where it went. I have no idea where that ball went. Pretty easy for me to zoom in and follow kids with my camera, but it is hard to find where in the world that ball went. And the nice part about having teenage boys is that if there's something I need a hand with, I can holler for them. The expiration date on packages sometimes drives me bonkers, because they're never in the same place, and half the time they're faded. And my oldest, I will holler for him to help me find the date on things. Sometimes I feel a little guilty because I'm a little bit of a helicopter mom, because we may be in a crowd, and when the boys were a lot younger, I always would stay right there with them. And it wasn't from the scary part of somebody going to take them. I mean, that's a terrible thought. But it was because if I didn't see where they went, it frightened me. So I hover a little bit. And sometimes they have to remind me that I'm hovering. And they do.
So looking back at everything you've accomplished in your life now, what is something that you would tell your younger self about the future?
To relax. And I don't think that has anything to do with being visually impaired. I think we all get stressed out and we panic. The world has got so much going on, and it can be so overwhelming. And I have to remind myself all the time that we're just going to take one day at a time and worry about the things that you have control over. Try not to worry about the stuff you don't. Try to enjoy it and make memories every day.
Well, thank you so much for doing this. I'm so excited to have you on here, and just thank you for all the wisdom that you shared.
Thanks for having me.
That was such a good interview, and I love listening to Jamie because she really just seems like such a grounded person, and it was just so wonderful to hear that she just sees herself as Jamie, and visual impairment is a part of that, but she even had to think of some of the things that she did. I thought that was really interesting that were specific to her visual impairment, that she's just so comfortable with being herself. So what did you all think?
Oh, I agree. Absolutely. It's, it's more about I'm a mom and I'm a PT and I do this. And I love that she shared that she doesn't always walk into the people that she works with and says, now I'm visually impaired. So I thought that was great. I was like, that the people say, did you forget your glasses today? Yes, even though,
the humor that she's able to use, and she just owns it. Yeah.
I thought she clearly is very comfortable with who she is, and that's wonderful.
Another thing that I think was really, really nice to hear is the connection that Jenny, you, and Jamie made over the ways that assistive technology are used. That Jamie was talking about how she uses her phone to zoom in on things and, the things at her house and things like that. And then you were talking about how Hannah uses some of those things too. So how did it make you feel to hear that an adult who is living their best life is doing some of the same things as your elementary school age daughter?
Yeah, I was really excited, especially to hear her say that thing about the phone, because Hannah uses that a lot, and we just kind of accidentally figured it out. Like, she likes to scroll through pictures on my phone, and I think one time we were sitting at some of their siblings' practice, and she was just scrolling through pictures on my phone, and I think she accidentally hit the video, and then all of a sudden she was like, Mom, there's a bird over there, and then started zooming in on the video and looking around, and kind of realized that she could use that to see further. And I was like, well, there's probably something better out there to use for that, but this works and this is always with us, so we're just going to go with it. So when I heard her say that she actually uses it, I was like, oh, yay, that's a legit thing.
It is.
Yeah, it's a real strategy.
Yeah, that's the word.
It is. And I would argue it is the best thing because it is always with you. So you don't have to carry something around or learn how to interact with something. She already knows how to do that. And so it's comfortable and it's just part of her life. And I think we need to advocate for parents to try things like that, because unexaccessible amount of money, and the phone is something that you always have. So speaking of advocacy, I thought it was really interesting too that she shared that if she could do something different of when she was younger, she would have somebody help her to advocate for herself more. Although, from what I heard, she's a great advocate for herself. But I think this is something that's kind of coming up in the field, that teachers want to know how to help children advocate for themselves, and parents too. I think that but the important thing to take away from your interview is that it's important to advocate. And I love her story about how her mom, they just kept doing it. They just kept doing things, and it's a routine, because that's what you need for little ones, and having those high expectations.
Yeah, and I think advocacy too can kind of flow. Like, I've seen Hannah when she was little, 3 or 4, she was great about advocating for herself. She was like, I need this, I need you to do this. But as she gets a little bit older and in elementary school, she's not quite as loud about it. And I don't know if it's that she has realized that she's a little bit different. And that kind of seemed to correlate with Jamie's age. Like she said, in PE at school, she might not say anything and then she'd get hit with the ball. But it sounds like now, as a grown-up or in college, she was able to advocate by herself, saying hey, I don't need your help. I can do this myself in class. I don't need someone to take my notes. And like, I found myself now having to work with Hannah, like, hey, remember, you need to say, like, you need to, and we talk about what advocacy is and advocating for herself, and she'll still do it, but she's not as outspoken as she used to be about it. So I'm interested to see how that changes as she gets older, if it gets a little easier again.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I never thought about that because the majority of my work is with families with children who are birth to 3, and advocacy looks different, I think, maybe over the lifespan, and that's really interesting.
Yeah, so I wonder if it's not necessarily about having a visual impairment, but I know that there's some research that shows that as girls in general move from late elementary to middle school, they tend to speak up less and advocate for themselves less. So, how do you pick out, is it the visual impairment piece? Is it is it just their age? That's a really interesting research project for somebody, for sure. But yeah, when they're little, you're right, Paige. It's about raising a confident child. You can do this. I want you to try this.
Teach them to make choices and say whenever they need help. Just that, like, I need help, or do you want to play this or this, or do you want this snack or this snack?
Yeah.
Sometimes it is a little bit more straightforward, I think, in some of the early years, and then whenever kids get older, it might be a little bit more complex because of all the other things that are happening with them.
For sure.
I don't know if we'll keep this in here or not, but this is a story that I talked with my husband about. When is the first time that you yourself ever, like, you can consciously remember yourself advocating? So I'm curious what it would be for you all. But for me, when I was a little girl, I had school lunch that, we had to get our school lunch. And my entire life, I've been a vegetarian, but my family hasn't. And even just as a young little girl, I was and still am. And so I grew up in a school that was kind of suburban rural. And so, of course, also at that time, vegetarianism wasn't really a thing that elementary schoolers participated in other than me. And I remember the first time I had to get school lunch. And I can't remember what the lunch was, but it had meat. And my mom taught me what I needed to say to ask for what the other option was, and the other option was cheese and crackers. So in my mind, I always remember, like, rehearsing it in my mind and being like, get to the line, I want cheese and crackers, and I still say that in my head sometimes, and I'll tell my husband about it. So anyway, do you all have a time where you first for yourself learned to speak up and ask for what you needed, or maybe there's another family that that had to do that?
I don't remember. That was too long ago for me. I do remember that I was terrible at advocating for myself, that I was painfully shy and quiet as a child, and pretty much an only child because my sibling wasn't born till I was 9. So, but my son, I do remember when my son was 7, we were at the mall or the movie theater or something, and he wanted something, and I just looked at him and went, well, ask her. So I made him go ask, and he did, and he's great at advocating for himself. So I hardly think it's that one instance, but I remember thinking how badly I did that as a child, and I didn't want him to be that way. So
I don't remember the first time I ever advocated for myself, but I do think that looking back on it as having a child with normal vision and a child with a visual impairment, that it's not that much different. Like, there's still times where I have to say to the other two, if you have a question or you want to do that, you need to go ask. You need to raise your hand, or you need to say, can I see you after class? You need to find out those things, because nobody's going to take care of you. And, when you're an adult, nobody's going to do all this for you. So in the same way that I may have to tell Hannah more often because it affects her, on a daily basis. But I still have to tell them, like, well, you need to figure it out. You need to ask. You need to do this. And it's really no different than just anything any parent has to deal with.
Yeah, advocacy is a needed skill, whether you are able-bodied or disabled or have a visual impairment or anything else. You have to speak up for what you need, and I think we all kind of learned that, so that's really cool.
There's
a fine line. There's a fine line between advocacy and being entitled.
There you go. That is true. You have
to be respectful.
That is true. That is totally true. Good for you. That's a great insight. So, well, thanks for sharing Jamie's interview with us, Jenny,
really
and it was a great time.
Thank you so much for listening to Feeling This Life. Please consider subscribing to Feeling This Life wherever you get your podcasts. And please take a minute or two to give us your feedback and your ideas for future episodes by completing our survey, which is linked in the show notes. There, you'll also find ways to get in contact with us, and you'll find resources related to today's episode. Please join us again next time for another episode of Feeling This Life.